Thanks for watching Spooky South Coast, and be sure to click the subscribe button and enable notifications with the bell icon to stay up to date with future videos.
The island will call you when you are ready to come here.
We're talking about the connection that people have, but at the same time, this is still a community.
Yes.
And it will still have the same challenges that any community faces.
Yeah.
So how would you compare living in Lilydale as just a neighbor and a fellow citizen with the other people in town compared to living in other places?
We have a joke around here because Lilydale is technically an island. And we will joke that the island will call you when you are ready to come here. And so in some ways, this is like a bit of a safe haven for many of us, to be around people of like mind. We are truly a community, and that's why most of us moved here. I did not choose to be a professional medium, except that I could be a medium within this community. And that's what makes a difference to me. That's what I wanted for my life. And there's a sense of dedication that I see with the people that live here, that's what they want to promote, that, you know, they have more in common than they have differences because of that. So, you know, every community at this time is struggling with, okay, we want to revamp infrastructure, or we want to bring a little more of this kind of education in, or, you know, what are we going to do to help the next generation come up? And I think that there's a very nurturing energy here that really does get involved with younger people and lift them up, and bring them along gently and slowly so that they can eventually take over and kind of keep that that like-minded energy going, but still allowing it to evolve.
kid growing old. The night is getting cold. The days are going by so fast. When I'm alone with you at night, there's only one thing I can do. Out in the night,
this guy actually picks up this woman alongside of the road, puts her in front of him on the horse. When he comes to the town in the morning, he realizes that there's actually a corpse in front of him. There. But I do think there are things that we understand as human beings. Like there are things too that are kind of unique about us, but there's also things that we have in common, right? We understand general feelings like betrayal, love, that kind of stuff. And then those stories, we kind of refer to it in folklore as polygenesis. More than one person can come up with some of these stories. So it makes sense. It's not like there's ever one single story that all these things kind of come from.
Right.
But yeah, there's so many things when we think about so many stories that have some similarities across the way. And then just things that stick around for a really long time. I always think of one of the oldest urban legends that we know about is the vanishing hitchhiker legend, which is a pretty common story about, usually the modern versions involve someone picking up a hitchhiker and then finding out kind of through the night, either she disappears from the back seat of the car, she leaves the sweater behind, something like that happens, and the person finds out that she died like 10 years ago that very night. And we actually know of versions of that go all the way back to people riding on horseback, people being in carriages. And there's even a story, too, that's even older that goes to two people walking next to each other. The horseback one's actually one of the best ones because this guy actually picks up this woman alongside of the road, puts her in front of him on the horse. She gets heavier as the night goes on, and when he comes to the town in the morning, he realizes that there's actually a corpse in front of him.
Wow! I like that one.
Story.
Oh, that's
why I have to tell it.
That's way better than the Dickie Lee song, where it's just, I found a sweater on her grave, And
yeah, you're right. It's so much better than a sweater on a grave.
AKA the Growing Pains episode for anybody, the Halloween Growing Pains episode for anybody that remembers that. But we have our own hitchhiker story here, where we are on the south coast of Massachusetts. We have our red-headed hitchhiker to Route 44, and that same story is told up and down every road. It's not anything that. Although what's interesting is, I look at it the same way you do, where it's a story, and there's really no way to kind of trace it back to any kernel of truth, except for the fact that we do a stage show called An Evening of Ghost Stories and New England Legends, where myself and some of my friends, we tell these ghost stories in front of these giant photos displayed on a big screen behind us, and it's like a ghost tour on stage. And so I get up there the first time, and I tell the story of the red-headed hitchhiker of Route 44, and a guy comes up to me after the show and starts talking to me and says, you mentioned in that there's no record of anything ever happening on that part of the road or anything, but my brother's a cop, and he starts telling me the whole story of who this red-headed hitchhiker probably is and where that ghost story came about, which kind of blew my mind, because I'm like, but no, this is just a story that's told everywhere. How can there be this one true person that this one traces back to? But it just goes to show that maybe the real-life tragic event happens and the urban legend just builds up around it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, that's entirely possible with a lot of these, because some of them are stories where something like that could happen. I mean, that's that believable element of them.
Good evening and welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa, science advisor Matt Moniz, and also my voice, which is back, which is nice. It's nice to have my voice back since I had to do the show last week alone. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
It's everybody was pretty much sick all at once.
Yeah.
Stephanie Burke was not here. She was away, but she was also sick. She was just sick while she was away. and she's sick again this week. She actually showed up to do the show, and she was messaging me and telling me like some of the symptoms she still had, and I said, no, don't come in. First of all, like if you're sniffling and coughing and wheezing and all that stuff, like trust me, it's terrible to have to talk on the radio if you're already feeling like that. But also, I'm just starting to beat down this cold that I've had for weeks. I don't need to catch something else too. So, Moniz, if you brought in any germs from the lab, I don't.
It's funny. I just started at a new lab this week.
I know, and I'm worried about what you're going to start bringing in for show and tell. But, well, and congratulations on that, too, by the way.
Thank you.
And we are going to be talking tonight about UFOs with our guest, Dr. Irena Scott. Do I sound all right, man? I sound a little bit far away to myself. All good over there? Okay. So we'll be talking a little bit later on with Dr. Irena Scott. We'll be talking about her own personal experiences with UFOs, as well as some of the information that she's learned in her research. But I'm really excited to have her on because when she was on with us on Midnight in the Desert a while back, she was telling us how she had her first experience in the Bridgewater Triangle. Well, she was telling us where the experience was, and I realized that it was in the Bridgewater Triangle when she started explaining to me the specifics of where it was. So you look like, Matt, you look like there's something wrong. It definitely sounds weird to me. I don't know what it is either. I don't know why. I have to be like right directly on the mic. I can't go off mic at all usually. And this one's usually pretty good, but we'll figure it out as we go along. So we'll be talking with her coming up in just a little bit about her experiences. And then before that, though, we have some special guests that will be joining us to talk to us about, you've heard us mention it for a few weeks now, the X-Filers United Conference, which is coming up. And I believe we have our guests on the line for that. Good evening. Is this Jamie? Oh, I should turn the phones on. There we go. How about that? Hello. Yes, Jamie. All right. We have Jamie Mauricio on the phone with us from the X-Filers United Conference. Is it going to be just yourself, or is Val joining us too?
Val should be joining as well, yes.
Okay. Oh, and here we go. She's coming in now. So let's add her into the conversation. Oh, and I dropped Jamie off. This is starting off well. Let's welcome Val to the show. Good evening, Val. Is that you?
Yes, that's me. Hi, how you doing?
Hi, it's great to talk with you.
Good. Thank you for having me.
I'm just waiting for Jamie to call back in now because I cut him off accidentally when I went to take your call.
Okay. All right.
I'm much more professional at emceeing events, I promise, than I am at pressing buttons on the radio.
I'm sure you are. I have no fear.
So we will have him join us in a few moments when he calls back in. But we've been talking for a few weeks about this X-Filers United Conference, and it was your idea, Val, to put this conference on. What gave you the idea of putting this on?
Well, there was actually two things. One is it's one of my all-time favorite shows, number one. And there was a great energy, the resurgence, the new season. There was an energy. And I said, it really would be nice to have people together who love the show, but not just the romance and stuff, the whole show, And then I said, and then I thought, well, I don't really have, many of my friends are not interested in the paranormal like I am or in the X-Files. So I said, I really would like to start meeting people and maybe put something together where I can meet people where we can discuss and learn from each other. And that's how it started.
And then, and Jamie Mauricio, you got involved as well with the conference. How did you get involved?
Yeah, that's correct, Tim. So, first of all, thanks for having us on. This is great. And I I've been a researcher of the paranormal ufology topic for a little over 10 years now, and I'm always looking to attend local conferences. And so when I did a Google search back in December, the conference X-Filers United popped up, and I saw the organizer was Val, so I actually reached out to her via email. And then she wrote, I said, hey, I'd love to help out with the conference if you need some help. And she emailed me back, and so Val and I met in person about a little over a month ago and chatted, and I've been helping Val organize the conference since then.
And it's really, the lineup is fantastic. Just taking a look, it's going to be happening from Friday, April 26th to Sunday, April 28th. And you can find out all about it by going to x-filersunited.com if you want to check out the website. It's happening at the Crown Plaza Hotel in Warwick, Rhode Island. And really, it's a who's who of strange and interesting topics and people that you've heard on this show before, friends of ours and some friends of Moni's, and names that will certainly be familiar to anybody that is familiar with the topic of the paranormal. Of course, Greg and Dana Newkirk will be there, Colin Schneider. There'll be a screening of the Bridgewater Triangle documentary, which is something that I know has come together recently with Aaron Cadju in the house, Tom Reed, Paul Eno, Gary McKinstry, Mike Stevens, Shane Soroyes, Joshua Cutchin, Suzanne Chancellor, Mike Clellan. Oh, so many people. And of course, one of our favorite people in the world, Andrew Lake, will be there as well. I'm so glad that you're including Andrew, because you really can't have something paranormal in Rhode Island without including Andrew Lake.
Well, I'm just amazed at our lineup, and a big part of that is for Jamie. I mean, I was asking the universe because I needed some more help. I needed help, and the universe gave me Jamie, and he really helped bring a lot more people to the conference, a lot more speakers.
And Jamie, I was reading your bio on the website, and you're originally from here, from New Bedford.
That's correct, yes. Originally from New Bedford, Tim, and yep, I lived there, grew up there, moved to Rhode Island back in 1999, and lived in California for a couple of years, but been in Rhode Island for a while. And really, you know, my background was really a mainstream kind of person. Didn't really have you know, much insight into the ufology topic until about 10 years ago. Some events happened, some strange events happened that led me down this path, down the rabbit hole, and now I've been researching the topic for 10 years, and think it's a really important topic, and something that a lot of folks should be aware of, and so I'm passionate about it and love getting the stories out.
And of course, you'll be presenting as part of the conference, but also you had mentioned to me when we were on the phone, of course, you know, Matt Moniz has agreed to be part of this event. And when I actually found out about it before Moniz told me about it, because I was on Greg and Dana's page and I saw that they were coming to Rhode Island, and I said, oh, that's great. They're going to be in our neck of the woods. And then I find out Moniz is going to be there. I was like, well, you know, I'm going to.
Well, let's clarify. I'm going to be there running the audio-visual part of things.
Yeah, but you're going to be there talking with people and sharing your own stories with people. You know, people can go up and talk to you, and so this is really going to be like a great gathering of people. But Jamie, you were talking about not only having people present things individually, but also having some roundtable, like panel discussions, and all different ways of approaching these strange topics that just don't get enough. We don't all get together enough to talk about these things.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. Absolutely, yes. On Saturday evening, we'll have a dinner planned. We're looking to have a speaker panel at that dinner event with several of the speakers. That should be an awesome part of the weekend as well. And yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, a lot of folks, I think these conferences help educate those who are in the dark about the topics, but also, you know, many of those who have had paranormal experiences or experiences, you know, in the ufology area, really help folks share experiences with one another, connect, and you know, I've been to these conferences, several of these myself, and I've seen how folks help each other. So I think it's fantastic in that regard as well.
And Val, have you had your own experiences yourself?
Actually, no. I guess you could say I'm a wannabe.
Well, I was going to say, would you like some? Because we could probably arrange a few for you.
Okay. But I've always been interested in it, and but I have never really had a true experience. And I just want to add with the convention is we're going to have, I think, a couple more surprises for people. Just to put that out there. Couple of things are in the works.
That sounds great. And if you want to have a true paranormal experience, sit next to Moniz at dinner, because I noticed that cowboy baked beans are on the menu. So you'll definitely have a paranormal experience sitting next to him.
That sounds like fun.
And so people can actually go to the website right now and they can purchase tickets. They can go to x-filersunited.com and they can get their tickets for this event. I can't believe the price for this, for all of the things that are planned, for everything that you can get involved with, to go for all 3 days. only $60. I mean, that's an insane deal to get all of this entertainment and information and to be able to connect with all these folks. I think people are going to jump on that right now, but we want to stress that's an early registration price, right? The prices are going to go up soon.
Right, but it has been right now the cutoff is February 28th. We might extend that a little bit more, but if people, once we get, when people start, tickets and stuff, I'm not so much concerned about the price. I want to make it affordable for people. That was one of my main things. And I saw the different comparisons of different conventions, and I thought that was a fair, amount of money, because I want, people are going to be coming and spending hotels and stuff like that. I want it to be affordable for people.
Well, it certainly is. I mean, essentially, it's $30 for one day. So if you're going to go, you might as well go for all 3 days. Buy the 3-day pass for 60 days. It's like buying 2 days, getting one free. It's a fantastic deal.
Yeah, and the hotel, the hosting hotel, Crown Plaza, is a beautiful hotel. They're giving us a good price. I think people will be very pleased with the accommodations, so I think that's another plus. And we're right on, if you know Rhode Island, even many people don't know Rhode Island, but we're like 5 minutes from a main strip, and there's like every single type of restaurant you could ever imagine. So if you like sushi, there's places for sushi. If you like a pizza, there's pizza. There's everything down there. It's very accessible to people. And if you like going to casinos, we have several around the area. If you want to extend your stay a little bit and spend a little money at the casinos, we have quite a few in the surrounding areas.
That is true.
I have a little surprise for both of you.
Ooh.
That sounds good.
Yes.
Does this relate to the beans?
No, it actually relates to helping out with expenses. I was able to talk Tom Reed into coming hanging out at my place for the weekend, so you don't have to cover cost of a hotel room for him. And he said he also says he wants to drive up because he also wants to take a little trip with me here and there, so you don't have to take care of an airfare, just cover his gas.
Oh, thank you so much. Please tell him I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
A lot.
That's also better for everybody that would have been staying at the hotel, because now when they get abducted, they can get abducted from Monize's house instead of having it happen at the hotel and risk having everybody else go up with them. So.
Well, I just want to say there's a lot of synergy over the past year. I mean, with regard to Tom and his site for, his monument and his site, and the new Kirks and the new documentary that is getting rave reviews. It just seems like a lot of positive synergy has happened over the last year, and I think this will help keep it going into the next year and the year after.
Well, what's great is, Jamie, with this lineup, you've brought together people who are certainly, who's who of the lecture circuit, but you've also got a lot of people that might not be as familiar to people. So you've brought together a good mix of speakers that will present, even the ones who we're familiar with, they're always presenting something different, but you're going to go to this convention and you're going to hear things that you've never heard before.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. Yeah, I'm really excited about the lineup of speakers. As you mentioned, there's great variety, various topics, everything from paranormal to cryptozoology to the ufology topic, and really it's been just a network of connections. As I mentioned, I researched the topic, had some of my own experiences, but over the years, attending various conferences and meeting folks, really built that network up. And so as soon as I met Val, one of the first things I did was I reached out to several of these contacts, and then that's what led me, to all these folks who just, as Val mentioned, all the energy behind it. Everyone was just so eager to be part of it and excited and so helpful, and so it's gained a ton of momentum. And so it was fortunate to to know these fabulous folks and bring them all together. So really excited about it.
And Val, you still have space open for people that would like to be vendors too, right?
Yes, I was just going to, hopefully I could get that in. We want some vendors. We need vendors. All you have to do is contact me or Jamie, and I could give you more information. I just need your email, and I'll email you more information. And I'm looking for like different types of vendors. That I'm looking specifically, if I can say, someone who might sells paranormal equipment, and maybe I would like maybe a comic book or a toy thing that's always popular, and maybe an artist. More artists are always welcome. Oh, and I'm also looking for more psychics too. Tarot readers would be wonderful. So anyone who wants to have who wants to sell something, please just get in touch with me or Jamie, and we'll get right back to you.
We can help you out with people from all of those genres. So we've got plenty of connections to help you fill up those vendor spaces. And of course, just taking a look at some of the vendor prices, like to our friends out there that are listening that go out and purchase vendor tables at different conventions. I mean, the rates for this are extremely affordable. So definitely get involved. It's absolutely worth it to have people who are of like mind all together and have us all get together for a weekend and make it so that all the normal people that are staying at the Crown Plaza Hotel are like, what are we doing here? Why did we pick this weekend to come and stay here?
Yeah, thank God the Crown Plaza has had a few conventions that are like outside the box, so they're going to be happy. They'll be fine. So, yeah, that'll be good. That'll be fun. I just want to have fun. I really want people to have fun, to really get to know each other, and to learn and to share their ideas, their experiences, and maybe make some new connections, that they can continue after the conference or convention.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to getting to meet you guys in person, and we'll keep everybody up to date with everything that's being announced for this as we get closer to the event. But again, if you want to go to the website to check it out for yourself, just go to xfilersunited.com. That's x-filersunited.com. You can get all the information. It's happening April 26th, 27th, and 28th at the Crown Plaza Hotel in Warwick, Rhode Island. For those of you who are outside of the area, Warwick is the place where Taps used to have their office. So when you used to watch that show, they'd show all the aerial shots. That's Warwick, but this is literally like it's close to Providence, but it's still kind of small town America. It's a great place to come and visit, and I know that we can scare up a good time for everybody with all of our friends around this area. So it's worth traveling, no matter where you are in the country or where you are in the world. Come and get together for this event. It's going to be fantastic. Val and Jamie, thank you for putting this together, and we look forward to talking with you more in the coming weeks.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a great night.
Thanks for having us on. I really appreciate it.
Have a good one, then, guys.
Take care.
Take care. Thanks.
That's going to be one heck of a party, I think, but also a great opportunity to really learn a lot of things too.
Oh, what I like is people that have been involved in the subject matter for a long time, locally, as well as some people from a bit further away. It is a good line.
I don't know what's going on, Matt, but when I'm going to cough and I turn down my microphone, I can still hear my cough over the microphone. Is it not turning off? There's something weird going on over here, and I don't know what it is.
Has the engineer been in playing with stuff?
No, yeah, it's a problem that happens here at other times of the day. But I'm looking over and I'm trying to see what might actually be causing the problem, and I can't see anything that would be an issue. But we'll work our way through it. I did figure out what's probably causing some of that phone feedback. It's because we have to boost the phone so high to get it to kick out over the video so that you can hear it over the video, that it's just over modulating. So I asked the engineer to fix that.
Just in case people want to know.
Well, because people,
Just because people want to know.
Well, people complain about it, so I'm trying to let them know why it happens. But I asked Frank if he could fix that, and he could kind of boost the audio from the phone. And I think he put it way down on his to-do list. So, because we are literally the only show on this station where we would have more than one person on the phone at once. Like everybody else either just doesn't know how to do it or won't even bother. Like I've heard, I won't name names, but I've heard one of the hosts on this station, Chris McCarthy, tell people on the air, he's like, oh, we can't have a guest on the phone and take calls at the same time. I'm like, you're outright lying to the audience because
we've been doing it for how many years?
Everybody else does it. So you're outright lying to the audience. But whatever. So, Yeah, we're the only ones that do it, but we'll get it fixed. And so we will be joined in just a few minutes by our main guest for tonight, Dr. Irena Scott. We'll be talking about, well, we'll talk a little bit about the truth behind UFOs. Are we being told the truth? Of course not. But what is it that they're covering up? She knows, and she's been to some places that the rest of us wouldn't have access to, and she'll tell us where she's been and why she's been there and what kind of research she's done. And then in addition, we want to talk to her about her own personal experiences. We want to talk to her about what happened to her and her sister in Massachusetts. And this is why I had Moniz make sure that he was definitely going to be here for this show.
I told you I would be.
Because you've been a long time researcher into this flap that occurred throughout southern New England at that time, and for a while there was quite a stretch of it. So I can tell you that Dr. Scott is very excited because this has been something that has kind of plagued her whole life, and we're telling her, well, we think that we may be able to help you get closer to some answers. So she was very excited to come on the show, and I'm going to see if I can get her on the line here.
Okay.
I should probably... Matt, do you mind seeing if you can get her on? I probably should have told you that ahead of time. I would try the landline.
Well, that's why I brought in some of the research material I dug up over the years.
I wanted to see if it was your microphone that was picking me up still, but no.
Okay.
Just weird. I'm just going to keep coughing throughout the show. I'm trying to be a professional and pull my microphone down so that nobody else can hear it, but it's not working. Yeah. I'm just happy to have this much of a voice. If you had heard me last week, I thought when I submitted the episode to Dark Matter for them to replay it on Tuesday, I thought Keith was going to email me back and say, there's no way I can run this show, right? Because my voice was that bad. And then last night, Dave, well, actually on Wednesday, Dave Schrader reached out to me and said, I'm doing some traveling. Is it possible you could fill in for me on Thursday and Friday if need be? And I said, yeah. I didn't tell him I don't really have a voice. But thankfully he didn't need me Thursday. But he had me fill in last night, and I was very worried that I wouldn't have enough of a voice to get through the show. But thankfully I did. So,
who is the guest, if I may ask?
Last night we talked to Dr. Eldon Taylor about subliminal. I did that all last night. I did that probably at least 3 or 4 times last night. Subliminal messaging, and also just being able to rewire your brain, and he gave me some pretty interesting tips of how to be able to do that. And he also said if the audience goes to his website, which is eldontaylor.com, ELDONTAYLOR.com, you can sign up and get a free course from him on how to rewire your brain. And then the second guest on the show for the last hour was Bernie Taylor, who talked about redefining and defining the history of the Sphinx, which was very interesting, based on some cave drawings that were found in Spain that makes it so we actually have to date the Sphinx as being older than it really was.
Well, Mark Schock, are you familiar with his work?
That was he talked about some of that.
Okay.
And really, like, it was, we only had an hour, and there was so much we were trying to cover. It was fascinating. So he reached out to me this morning and said, he'd like to come on Spooky South Coast sometime, and so did Dr. Eldon Taylor. I don't want to seem like I'm poaching guests from Midnight in the Desert, but
we all share.
But I kind of am poaching guests. Well, because Michelle does a great job of booking that show and bringing on some fascinating people. And back on January 4th, on my birthday, I got to host the show for Dave. And my guest that night was our guest that is joining us tonight, Dr. Irena Scott. She received her PhD from the University of Missouri in physiology, did postdoctoral research at Cornell University, has been an assistant professor at St. Bonaventure University, and has done research and teaching at, I'm required to say it this way, The Ohio State University. the University of Missouri, the University of Nevada, and Battelle Memorial Institute. She worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency and the Aerospace Center in satellite photography, was a volunteer astronomer at the Ohio State University Radio Observatory, and is taking flying lessons. Her publications include books and works in scientific journals, magazines, newspapers, and she was a correspondent for Popular Mechanics magazine. She served on the MUFON Board of Directors from 1993 to 2000, is a MUFON consultant in physiology and astronomy, and is a field investigator as well. And she joins us tonight on Spooky South Coast. Good evening, Dr. Scott. Are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Hello. It's great to talk with you again.
It's great to talk to you again, too.
And this was something that I think was almost destined to happen. You know, when I say that I will host Midnight in the Desert, when they ask me to fill in, they always say, like, do you want us to find you a guest that fits any particular topic that you want to cover? And I always say, nope, just book me a guest like you would for Dave, and I'm willing to talk about anything and everything. And it just so happens, of course, that the first guest that night that I talked to was you, and we find out that automatically there's a connection between what has happened to you and what I've been doing here for years and talking about the Bridgewater Triangle. So I think it was kind of destined for us to meet over the radio airwaves.
Well, I'm certainly glad, because I've been reading about that.
And so you've been researching into the Bridgewater Triangle?
Uh-huh.
Well, I can tell you that Matt Moniz has been researching the UFO connections to the Bridgewater Triangle for a long time. He actually brought in some materials tonight, but when you were describing to me on the show, and I'm going to have you recount it for our listeners in a minute, but when you're telling me about your UFO experience that you had, all I can think of in my head is, where did this happen? I got to remember I got to pinpoint exactly where it was, and I got to pinpoint exactly when it was, because it was already triggering in my brain things that I'd heard in the past, and kind of instantaneously I was able to realize, like, this is why we were supposed to talk. So before we get into all of the work that you have done in UFO research and some of the places that you've been to and some of the things that you've seen, let's start off with that first experience. Let's talk about how you got interested in this topic to begin with.
Okay. Should I start at Boston, or should I start for when I was a child?
I would actually, this is why I definitely want to have Moniz be part of this. I would actually start with your childhood experiences, because I found that to be kind of the most fascinating part of this whole thing. It was an aspect of UFO encounters that I was unfamiliar with.
Always start from the beginning.
Okay. This started when I was very young. My sister and I were she was about 4 and I was about 6. And we were very poor, living in a farmhouse and sleeping in an attic room. And neither one of us had heard of UFOs or anything. We just had a radio, and my parents played particular stations on it. So we hadn't heard about UFOs for years later, but we were sleeping in the opposite beds on the opposite side of the room, and it was a nice clear night and after dark, and I woke up and something was flying around the room. I had no idea what it was, but after watching it for a while, I noticed that it acted like something alive, because it seemed to be guided. There was furniture in the room, our beds and furniture, and it was an attic room, and the walls sloped up to the ceiling. There was a ceiling about 3 feet between the two walls. And the object I was watching, it was small, and it seemed to be guided because it never bumped into anything. It flew for at least a minute or more than that around the room, just a random browsing-like motion up and down and back and forth, but it never hit anything. It would turn about a foot away from anything. came toward, and it got quite close to both of us. I didn't know my sister was awake, and so I was just watching it. And after it flew around, it got close to both of us, and then it suddenly flew up to the ceiling. But it didn't hit the ceiling. It seemed to know where the ceiling was, like everything else. And it made a right-hand turn, and there was a lamp in the middle of the room, which was turned off. And it just flew quite smoothly to the lamp, and there was about 1.5 feet of space between the lamp edge and the walls. And it knew just where to go, and it circled the lamp in such a way it didn't hit either the lamp or the walls. And it circled for a while, like maybe 20 or 30 times, and seemed to speed up. And then it just made a perfect spiral down under the verified all at once, and we both shrieked at once and ran down the stairs, and were so scared we collided and fell down the stairs and ran to our parents. And they didn't believe us. So that was the first thing that happened. And later we heard about UFOs, but even when we heard about UFOs, we thought of them as airplane-sized things.
Yeah, you really didn't think that whatever this thing was that you had experienced in your room would be connected to that. But I remember I mentioned to you before that it sounded, it sounds to me like something that today we would be like, oh, it sounds like a drone. But that's not something that would have been around back then that you would have had flying around your room. And certainly if there was, it would have had to have been somebody there to operate it to make that happen. Moniz, have you ever heard of anything like that in terms of an experience where there's this small thing floating around the room?
Oh, yes. A number of occasions, and especially in abductee cases.
Oh. So it sounds like you might have gotten lucky there, Dr. Scott. That
well, I was going to say, mind if I ask a few questions?
Go right ahead.
Hi, Doc. A few questions for you. Can you describe the approximate size of this object? Its color, texture, whether it emitted light or not?
I thought it was maybe about 1/2 inch in size, and that was the inside part because it looked like a piece of metal, but it glowed like real hot metal, and there was a glow around it.
What color?
Sort of an orange. It was like real hot iron.
Okay. And you're saying it was about 1 inch. Did it have a particular shape?
My sister seems to remember it as round, and I seem to remember it as sort of like a throat longy or something. Submarine shape, but I'm not real sure.
Okay. Now, you're saying this flew around. Did it fly in a angular motion, or was it more curved and fluid in its path?
Curved and fluid.
Okay. So you're definitely sure it was not a glowing insect because of the
It was
way...
definitely not a glowing insect.
That's what I'm trying to determine if you know.
No, it didn't turn off or on and go through the swooping like a lightning bug or anything
Yes.
like that.
Okay. As you understand, some people say, oh, it's just a lightning bug flying around the house.
Well, it was like a bug, but it definitely wasn't a lightning bug.
Okay.
And Dr. Scott, in your work as a MUFON field investigator, have you ever heard anybody else having a similar experience?
Yes. Many years later, I read a book by Jenny Randalls, and she talked about, well, I read an article, she talked about bedroom sightings of young children, of small objects in bedrooms, and then the people often fit a pattern where they later see UFOs. And we were odd because usually this happens to one person. And with my sister and I, we had that experience together when we were young. And then we had another experience later together.
And just so we can clarify, when you had the experience when you were younger, what was the location? Now, obviously, you were in your bedroom, but where did you live at the time?
We were in north of Ohio. It was a very rural place at that time. We had just a gravel road that was sort of like a trail going by, and our neighbors were farming with horses. We'd just finished farming with horses, and the houses were quite a ways away from each other, and we were on a family farm, and neighbors were our family.
May I ask what year? I don't mean to out you in terms of your age, but
we think it was about 1948.
okay.
All right, so let's kind of fast forward. Now, that's the only experience that you had really with anything UFO related until this later experience that you had here in Massachusetts, right?
No, I had a couple of other things.
Oh.
Once I was sleeping outside on our porch. We had a rock porch, and large ball of light flew over, and very slowly. And I just woke up and saw it, and it was flying over. And when it was directly over me, all the dogs in the neighborhood began to bark, and our dog locked in the kitchen, began to jump and bark and make noises. It couldn't have seen it, but I thought there was some kind of an animal reaction. And then my sister and I both had seen other ones before we had one together, before we had a sighting together again.
So she had another experience in that same area in Ohio?
Uh-huh.
What was her experience like?
Well, she was driving with somebody else, and she saw what looked like a UFO over a neighbor's house that just disappeared. And she had kind of a date, but later, just at random, I was talking to these neighbors, and they said they had had a UFO land in their field, which was sort of unusual, but neither of them knew the right date, although it was roughly about the same year.
And so then the two of you were together again when you had the experience out this way.
Uh-huh.
And so why don't you walk us kind of through that and give people kind of the circumstances of how that came about?
Okay. It was 1968. It was July the 13th, 1968. And I was working for the Defense Intelligence Agency in Washington, D.C., and she was taking postgraduate work at Drew University in New Jersey. And since we were both on the east side of the country, we decided to drive up and see the New England states. And so I drove up to Drew one morning with some coworkers and let them off and took pictures of them and her and things. And then we drove up to Boston. We reached Boston while it was still daylight, and we decided to explore some more. So we went up. We were on Route 128, and then we went to Route 3, and we traveled up it to into New Hampshire. And I found out later, just by accident, we were kind of on the same place that the Hills have had their sighting, part of it. And we came back to Boston and went around the Outer Belt. And then we took Route 9, and we went into Boston because I wanted to get in the heart of Boston and stay all night and see Boston. But we couldn't find a place to stay. They said everything was filled up. And so we were taking Route 9 back out of Boston. And we began to see a blinking light south of us. It was, we could see airplanes. There was a airport, Northwood Municipal Airport, south of us. And we could see the airplanes flying in and landing with their landing lights and all their airplane lights and everything. And the object we were watching was appeared to be lower than the airplanes, and it just had one light. It was a very, very, very white light, and it was blinking off and off. And my sister kept saying, "This is odd." And I kept saying, "Oh, it's a helicopter," blinking its landing lights. I'd never seen anything like that, but I wanted to explain it. So we were kind of arguing. And then we both admitted to each other we'd seen UFOs, and it wasn't something we had talked about. And so we kept on driving, and I went on the what was on the outer belt, 128, and we were watching it. And then I drove on the Route 95, the freeway, and it was still ahead of us. And we were arguing about it. So as I was driving along, there was the woods on the west side of the road, and about, I guess, maybe 50 feet away from the car, there was something that looked like a glass basketball. It looked like you could see inside of it, and inside of it was this light that was going through a spectrum of different shades of red and different shades of blue. And I had no idea what that thing was. But as we drove by it, it was off to the side of us. The inside of our car lit up in green. And I had no idea what was going on. And I looked around. I didn't see anything green. I saw no green beam. The light beside the car wasn't green. So we kept on, and we were still arguing. And we kept on driving down 95. And finally we were about maybe east of the Norwood Airport. My sister started yelling to stop, 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 stop. And she said it was going to go over the car. And so I had my hand pointed out the window, and I was going to tell her it's a helicopter. And then I saw way off what looked like a meteor. And then the thing came over the trees, and it was pretty low. You could see it very distinctly. It was soundless, and it had 7 things along the side that looked like windows. They were a row of what looked like square windows. And this very, very, very white light was coming through. It looked like it would hurt your eyes if you were inside it. And it was going through a particular blinking pattern of a sequence of when the lights are blinking on and off. And you might say, well, this has to be a blimp. Well, we grew up on a farm, and there was a freeway through our farm. It was also a blimp route, and we were very used to seeing blimps. And I have a YouTube channel with a lot of videos of blimps with even lighted sides at night and things, and we were pretty used to seeing things like that. And this wasn't anything like a blimp. And so I stopped, and I had a camera in my back seat and high-speed film. I was lucky to have that in my trunk. And if I had even thought for a second it had been a UFO or something, I would have had everything loaded. But I never thought of that. So I didn't have time to apologize to my sister. But we got out, and I looked for my camera and my film and started putting film in the camera. In the meantime, it was very slowly going over us, and we could see it very well. And it looked like we could see inside the windows, and we were discussing what's inside the windows, and we kept asking each other, how many windows do you count, what's in there, what do you see, to make sure we were both seeing the same thing. Do you hear anything? No, either one of us heard anything. And so I had my camera loaded, and I thought, oh, this is amazing. I'll get a real unique picture because I'll get the picture of an inside of a UFO. And just then a truck driver drove over in front of us and parked. And he came back, and I thought at first, oh, we'll have another witness. This is great. He stood right beside me, and he said, "What are you looking at?" And that was strange because this thing was pretty visible.
Right.
And so I pointed at it.
You would think like he was seeing it too. Yeah. Like.
Yeah. And so I pointed at it, and neither one of us said UFO. We just acted like it was a airplane or something. And he rotated around just exactly in the opposite direction, looked at the same altitude, and said, "I don't see anything." Then he rotated back and looked at me and asked the same question. What are you doing? What are you looking at? And we pointed again. He rotated around, looked in exactly the opposite direction, and said, "I don't see anything." And then he turned to face me again and said, he didn't say anything, he just kind of pointed to his head like I was crazy. And he went back to his car. By that time, I forgot a part here that my sister, right when we stopped, my sister said the inside of the car lit up, and she thought the object put a light in our car. I was by the window, so I didn't see it. But then I still wanted a picture of the object, and it seemed to be a lot farther away, and it was just a point of light again because it was so far away the windows were merged. So I climbed up a hill with my Polaroid and took 5 pictures, and one of them turned out. It was guesswork because it was timed exposure. It was nighttime, and I was pretty careful in guessing at the time and everything. But anyway, I got one picture and came back to the car. And the object went to the airport, and it began circling the airport. And it was in this real pattern motion where it would blink twice from south to north. When it got north, the semicircle would go so fast you couldn't see it. And it just kept going through that pattern and circling the airport. And at that time, I didn't realize this until I was writing my book or later, but the man, all the time I was thinking maybe this was an accident or something, or coincidence. But it wasn't, because if you point at something, somebody looks in the direction you point. Well, he looked in the exact opposite direction. So it wasn't just an accident, like he didn't see something. He was deliberately not looking at it or looking in the opposite direction. He knew where it was. At that time, I didn't know. We were trying to figure out what on earth the thing was, and I didn't know where it would go after it would stop circling the airport. And so we were facing south on Route 95, and I thought maybe it'd go north. So I took off in my car on the freeway to turn the car around at the next interchange. Well, at that time, the man, he was in a truck, and he just started following us right on my bumper and beaming his bright lights into my rearview mirror so that I was blinded. I didn't know what to do. I slowed up, I speeded up, I changed lanes and everything else, and he just stuck right on my bumper. I couldn't see behind me. I was blinded, and I thought the car is lighter than a truck, so I would floor it, and I did, and he just stuck right on my bumper. And I thought we were going to get killed, and I said goodbye to my sister, and I asked, the only way I could think of to get away from him would be to swerve off the left-hand side of the road. And so I was going to do that. And I asked her to look behind us, and she said she couldn't see anything. And so I did that. But if somebody had been coming faster than us on the right-hand side, we'd have been killed. But I swerved off and got off and turned around at the next interchange and went back north. It was still circling, but then it did take off to the northwest. And so I followed it, and I went past the light that was changing colors, and the inside of the car lit up in green again. And then it was going northwest, and we had to, the roads usually went north and south and east and west, so we had to keep zigging and zagging. And finally I wound up in this old, really bad country road with potholes and houses a long ways away from each other.
I mean, that's every road in Massachusetts. I'm sorry. I have to apologize for all of us, but yeah, that could have been any road.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea what road it was, but it was just going a little bit faster than I was, and I couldn't keep up with it without tearing my car up. And so I turned around, and we looked for motel rooms again, but everything seemed to be closed. And so we drove all the way back to Grew, and we got there about 6 in the morning, and I slept for a while. And then I was waiting for the people that wanted to ride back, but they never contacted us. And so it was quite a bit later when I left for Washington. And then I had a poltergeist experience. You want to hear that?
Well, let's hold off on that because we have about 2 minutes left before we have to take a break for the news. When we come back on the other side, we'll have you share that experience, and we'll try and dig into your experience, and we'll go over some of what was going on in this area at that time to try and see if we can make some of those connections between what happened to you and what other people have reported as well. And then, of course, we can also talk with you more about your work and that you've done in the years subsequent and the research. And by the way, if anybody would like to check out Dr. Scott's books, and I'm going to bring them over here for the camera, although Matt's been putting them up on the screen. We have Sacred Corridors, Secrets Behind the Real Project Blue Book, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Roswell, Patel, Memory Metal, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and UFO Cover-Ups. You can get that book as well as the previous one, Inside the Lightning Ball, Scientific Study of Lifelong UFO Experiencers. Those are both available on her website, irenascott.com, if you want to check that out during the break. And we'll have it linked up with everything here in the chat room, and you can be able to go over there and pick up the books during the break. So why don't we do that? We'll take a break for the news, Dr. Scott. We come back on the other side. We'll have you tell us more, and then we'll kind of dig into some of the other things that were going on in this area at the time.
Great.
All right. And just a reminder, during the break, we do have a couple of events coming up as well. We'll be at the Oliver House in Middleborough coming up, as well as at the two houses in Winchendon, the Murdoch Whitney House and the Isaac Morse House. You can get tickets to those events at SpookySouthCoast.com. The special is still on. You can get those during the break. So we'll be back with more Spooky South Coast coming up in just a few moments.
Like Paranormal Talk Radio, you'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Welcome back. Hour number 2 of Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz. Stephanie Burke is out sick. She did try to show up this week, but I told her, heck no. I'm just starting to get over my cold. I don't need to catch whatever it is that you have. But she will be back soon. And we do have some great shows coming your way in the coming weeks as well. So I think what we've done is we've tried to, set things up, book some shows in advance, get an idea of what it is that we're going to be talking about instead of this, kind of booking on the fly thing. I like to be able to have the opportunity for us to react to what's going on.
Yeah, I understand.
But at the same time, I like to have things set up so that we can kind of also know what's coming up on the docket. So just to let everybody know that next week we'll be joined by, I'm going to butcher his name, I know it, but Robert Lopaka Kapanui.
Okay.
Who is a friend that Stephanie and Porter made when they were out in Hawaii. And we're going to be talking about Hawaiian legends and lore. And so what's interesting about this is they went out there for, they had a Mysterious Hawaii conference, and they went out there and took part in that. But I guess there's been some interesting stories that have happened since they've been there.
Yeah.
So they'll fill us in on all of that next week. And I believe she said Porter's going to be with her next week here in the studio, so we'll get both of their stories about the mysterious connections between them and Hawaii. And I bet you they're going to say it Hawaii because they've been there. Yeah. I'm not going to, because I've never been. It's like when people say, do you want to go get some of those Portuguese little donuts for breakfast? I'm like, oh, malasadas, and they're like, no. Then they say it with the port. They say the Portuguese. Yeah, no, I'm not going to say that because I'm not Portuguese and it'll sound stupid if I say it.
I am. I can say it.
Right. So I'll let them say they've been to Hawaii. They can pronounce it that way. I'm just going to say Hawaii. I also don't say, I say Charisse, which is enough for me to even say
Close
that.
Enough.
It's enough for me to even be able to say that. So for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, what does the rest of the country call that? Charisse, say there's another.
A Chirico? No, that's something.
No, they have a different way of saying it, though. I can't think of it.
Pronounced Charisse.
Right, but if they eat it like in California or something, they have a different pronunciation for it. Well, Matt probably knows.
Are you talking about chorizo?
Yeah, chorizo.
But chorizo is the
Spanish version,
Central American version.
But it's not the same thing. It's the same thing, though, isn't it?
Kind of, sort of.
Yeah, similar.
No, it's all spicy pork sausage to me.
Right.
And it's all delicious. So there's that. All right, why don't we get back into the discussion with our guest tonight, Dr. Irena Scott. I don't know, Dr. Scott, you're probably not aware of this, but at some point on every episode of Spooky South Coast, we have to talk about food.
Yeah.
So that filled our requirement for this evening. It's just, we don't mean to do it on purpose. It just naturally happens because it's all that we think about. But you were sharing with us before the break your experience here with your sister, and I just want to take a step back before we get into your poltergeist experience. You had mentioned that this happened in the area of the Norwood Airport, but you said that it kind of happened in the woods that was kind of to the west. I remember when we talked before, you said it was kind of over Sharon, right?
Yeah, I looked at the map when I made my notes, it was 1968, and the roads have changed. But we went down Route 128 to Route 95, and there's a woods on the west side of 95 before you get to the airport, and that's where we saw the light.
So I'm looking at a map now. So we're talking in the area of like Walpole, really kind of in the area now of what we would call like the Route 1 area, where out like in the Foxborough Walpole area. Yeah. So I mean it's a little bit outside of the Bridgewater Triangle in terms of like how Aaron Cadger would define it, but I would certainly include it because of the amount of strange things that are reported out there, especially from a UFO perspective.
So it's more in like the Canton area?
Yeah, kind of. Looks like it's a little bit more. It was south of 128, right?
Yeah, but not too far south.
So yeah, kind of in that same area, Canton, Norwood area. Okay. And I would definitely include that as being part of that, and especially when you're saying what you're describing is similar to some of the other craft that's been reported, not only in that area over the years, but as part of that flap, which we'll get into in just a bit. But before we do that, why don't you recount for us that poltergeist experience that you had?
Okay. I drove back home and got back to Washington, D.C. pretty late. I was going to bed, and I did. And I began to hear walking sounds in my room, like a man walking around with shoes on. I couldn't figure out what on earth it was. There was a little bit of light coming into the room from a street light. I couldn't see anybody. And when the walking got close to me, I would try to reach out and touch it, but I couldn't. And I could just hear this walking. It would go a few steps and stop, and then be someplace else in the room and go a few steps and stop. And I never heard anything like that at any other time. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And so I was terrified, but I went to sleep. And my alarm went off. And I thought it's morning, and I got up and started fixing breakfast, and I realized it was dark. And it was 1:30, and my alarm had gone off. And I was pretty terrified. I put a chair by the door and tried to prop it. And then, in spite of being terrified, I went back to sleep again. Well, the alarm went off at 2:30, 3:30, 4:30, and I think 5:30.
Wow.
And the alarm had the nub you turned it with had been broken off, so it was real hard to turn, and I normally use pliers to set it. But it was set right exactly on the right time each 30. And when I reset it, I just set it approximately way off. And so then I woke up in the morning, and I was working for the DIA, and I had this really high security clearance. It was above top secret. And I was afraid I had just gone insane. I'd never heard of poltergeist, and the only thing I think of is I'd gone insane. And so I was scared to death, not only with whatever was going on, but also about going insane. I might lose my job because of my security clearance. And so I was sitting on the bed, and suddenly my toothbrush flew across the room and hit the wall. And then everything became normal, thank heavens. And I had been rehearsing how to not speak to anybody at work because I was afraid I was insane. But nothing else happened after that.
And I'm sure, Moniz, we can discuss this too with Dr. Scott. I'm sure she's heard similar stories in the year since. But I know, Moniz, you and I have talked about the fact that people who have had UFO experiences will report other weird phenomena that take place.
Usually most people that have UFO experiences also have ghost experiences or paranormal experiences or cryptid experiences or all of the above. Once you're affected by one, you're affected by all. It seems to be a theme.
I'm sure that's something that's popped up in your later work with MUFON, Dr. Scott.
Yeah, much later I found out about poltergeists, and that people that have close encounters often see poltergeists, but I sure didn't know it then.
And it would have been nice to have known that, so you wouldn't have thought that you were going crazy. But so why don't we kind of dig into this a little bit then? Because as I told you when we discussed this, I remember saying to you, oh well, I have to have you talk to Matt Moniz because he has spent a lot of time researching and knows other people who have spent a lot of time researching the UFO flap that was going on in this area in, what was it, 67, 68, 69, right?
Correct.
And so just give us a little quick run through of when it began, where it began, and what people were reporting.
Okay. A good portion of it started in late 66, going into really full blown in 67 and 68, and then petering out towards the mid to late part of 69. But a bulk of the reportings came from roughly northern Rhode Island into parts of eastern Connecticut, all the way up through the tip of Cape Cod and around the Boston area. And what was going on at that time, obviously, was the Vietnam War. And there are, as the doc may know, a couple of bases that were of strategic importance at the time. They were SAC bases, in particular Otis out on Cape Cod. And they had a nuclear arsenal there, and it was part of, the cap that we used to fly around there. But the sightings that we're seeing were a large amount of disc-shaped objects and cigar-shaped objects. In 1967, there were a series of really clear photographs taken by a couple of individuals. One being Harold Trudell. He took close to 100 different photographs in a several-month period in Woonsocket and Cumberland area around the diamond mine.
And I feel like we should throw this out there because Dr. Scott might not be familiar with the geography, but where she had her experience, we're talking about 25 miles.
Continue going down 95, and you're going to be there in probably less than 20 minutes.
Huh.
Yeah. And now where I'm talking about is literally a stone's throw away from there. You're not far at all. And these photographs were extremely good. And there's even a short, I think it was taken in Super 8 at the time, Super 8 millimeter, of one of these craft during daylight operation in, I believe it's in Cumberland. It's either Diamond Mine Hill or somewhere in that area. The exact location was never, divulged because of whatever reasons they made up at that time, because they didn't want people treading on private property or whatever. He wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. However, but he was able to get a very good video of it. And later on, a person by the name of Joe Ferrier, who had a series of encounters, took a bunch of photographs of the same object, stills. And but he got introduced to Trudell by his own investigations. And Trudell wound up being what back then was called a contactee. He wound up meeting an individual at the corner of a farmer's field out there, and he had some information imparted to him and things like that, and the typical, we're here to observe you, we're, kind and gentle space brothers and looking to be, that particular type of thing. And he was guided to be at various locations around Rhode Island and southern Massachusetts, and he was rewarded with being able to take pictures of the craft. And those are just the really good cases. And I was introduced to these guys through Maurice. Maurice had been investigating them back in the 70s, when he was big into it. Maurice was my mentor, just for clarification, Doc. And I was able to look through both Joe Ferrier's material, because he created Probe Magazine and all of that pertaining to the whole flap. And what I'll do, Doc, is I will make copies of the magazines, I should say, for you, and send you copies so you can read about the history of what happened up here for yourself. Hopefully you'll glean some information that you may find usable out of that. But getting back to the rest of what happened, these...
Thanks.
Not a problem. These encounters happened all along the coastline of southern Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. And a lot of landing cases happened. There was series of landings that happened in the Cape, out on Truro, Wellfleet, and then there was the sightings that's actually in the Wareham Police Log 67 over onset. It's witnessed and verified by members of the police department and fire department as well. I think you actually saw that report, didn't you?
Probably. This is also the same flap too that was affecting this area where we were broadcasting from, especially over Round Hill in Dartmouth. Yeah. They were having, which was funny because at the time they were also conducting experiments, MIT experiments at Colonel Green's mansion in Round Hill in Dartmouth. A lot of electromagnetic experiments they were using. I don't know if you've ever been to the Museum of Science in Boston, Dr. Scott, but the Van de Graaff generator that they have there for the lightning show used to be at Round Hill. That's where they built it.
Correct.
To conduct these MIT electromagnetic experiments there. And so this was drawing in some of these UFOs. Every time they would turn this thing on, there would be these lights in the sky. So all of this was going on up and down, this area all throughout southeastern New England during that era, during that time that you had your experience. You said it was July of 68, right?
Yeah, it was July 13th, 1968.
And I know Moniz was showing us from some of the magazines during the break. He showed us an object that it looked disc shaped, but it was also so luminescent that it had like this round thing around us. And he was talking about like people reporting seeing the windows and everything. It kind of looks like what you were describing. When it's luminescent like that, it looks like a basketball.
Yeah, we saw the one with the 7 windows that seemed to be a big object, and the one with the small basketball-shaped one.
Now, the big object with the 7 windows, how would you describe its shape?
My sister and I both drew it independently, and it was dark, so we weren't sure. Hers was football-shaped, and mine was a little bit more prolonged than football-shaped.
Like a cigar?
Yeah, not that long,
but general design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
tubular.
See that?
Well, laundry shape or something.
And that's where I knew that there was going to be these connections, because I remember when we started doing the show, and Moniz was kind of coming on board with us to kind of advise us in some topics that we could cover. One of the first things that he was telling us about was Joe Ferrier and some of these UFO cases that happened. So it always stuck out in my mind as something to kind of further explore down the line. And then, hearing your story, it's like that fits in. Like, it's one thing when you can hear a story and, it has an experience for somebody that leads them to the work that you have done, but then to say we can fit it into this bigger picture too of some other things that were going on. And then that doesn't even take into account the whole Bridgewater Triangle aspect to this. The fact that this is an area, Dr. Scott, where we like to describe it as a bit of a thinning of the veil, as a bit of a doorway into something else, because we do have such amounts of high strangeness that happen here that it can't be ignored and it can't be dismissed as just being coincidence. There's a reason why all of these things happen here, and it's everything from UFO sightings, abductions, we have cryptid encounters, we have ghostly experiences. Every bit of paranormal phenomena takes place within this region where you had this UFO sighting. So I don't know if we can kind of extrapolate from your experience that it ties into all of the triangle phenomena. But one of the things that I don't hear a lot of is what happened to you and your sister, where you saw this man. This man basically tried to, deny what it was that you were seeing, and then tried to kill you. I haven't heard a lot of that associated with triangle experiences. That's amazing to me that happened to you.
You got the trucker Copacut Road, but that's
just a legend, though.
Yeah.
What's that?
There's a legend here of a mad. They call it the Mad Trucker of Copacut Road, where there's a dirt road that goes through the Freetown State Forest, and people will report seeing this truck in their rearview mirror. The lights will shine bright in their rearview mirror,
doing exactly like you said, riding right up your bumper
and trying to run you off the road. But then when you pull over on the side of the road, it disappears. But it's kind of more of an urban legend than anything else. But you saw a flesh and blood person.
Yeah, and he definitely didn't act normal.
And I can't help but kind of think that I don't know if I want to tie that in. Let me ask you, Dr. Scott, do you tie that into something metaphysical, or do you tie that into something of this planet? Do you think it was somebody? I mean, obviously you have above top secret clearance, so you know things that we don't know. You know things that you can't tell us. But would you think that would definitely have to be a flesh and blood human being, or could this have been some sort of a metaphysical projection?
I have no idea. He looked like a perfectly normal person, as far as I could tell.
Nothing odd about his appearance or about the way that he acted, aside from trying to kill you?
He didn't have an accent to me.
Could you tell nationality?
No, it was dark, and I was thinking about getting a picture. So in spite of the fact he acted really weird, and I was scared of him.
How about his dress?
I didn't notice his dress. I just noticed the truck was sort of like a large U-Haul. He caused us to split apart, though, because after I talked to him, I was afraid with my high-speed film, I might get lens flares from the freeway. And so I wanted to climb up this hill that was beside us. It was sort of a stupid thing to do, probably. But my sister became protective, and she said she didn't want me to climb the hill, and she wanted to either go with me or not. And I told my sister to guard the car because I was afraid the man would take over the car. And so he separated us because finally she stayed by the car and I went up the hill. And so he kind of separated us just because I was being very cautious about him.
I mean, it definitely sounds like it was a legitimate. I mean, I'm not trying to discredit your sighting and your experience, but it sounds like it was a real person as opposed to being like one of these, Men in Black type encounters.
I don't know, because he certainly didn't act normal.
Well, right. I mean, why would somebody be trying to tell you that you're not seeing what is obviously right in front of your own face, and then, trying to run you off the road at the same time?
And you just said there was a legend of a trucker. What kind of a truck did the trucker have in the legend?
That's like a Mack truck, right? In the Mad Trucker legend, what kind of truck is it that people report?
Oh, that's the thing. They all reported different things. Some are reporting like an 18-wheeler. Some are reporting like a Ford monster truck.
Mm-hmm.
Some it's just a regular pickup. Some it's a panel van.
I mean,
this was like a large U-Haul.
Which seems weird to me too, because why would? I guess maybe it's possible somebody was just out driving a U-Haul, but why would somebody driving a U-Haul stop when you're having this experience solely for the purpose of telling you that you're not seeing anything, there isn't anything there? Why would he even stop if he wasn't seeing the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was a trucker that was worried about us and saw us stop to check on us. But he obviously wasn't, because after he checked on us, he just stayed in his truck and watched us.
Right. I don't think if he was concerned about you, I don't think he would try to kill you just a few moments later. So that's in all your work, both. I mean, and I guess I know that you can't really tell us what you would know in your government work, but at least in your MUFON work, I'm sure that you've heard of similar stories, but nothing that would kind of indicate as to who that would have been. Certainly not any kind of clandestine, watcher type figure or some sort of agent of some unknown agency that would be looking to keep down your experience.
Well, I think it wasn't coincidence, because I was thinking about this after I finished writing my book, but if you point at something and somebody can't see it, they look in that direction. Well, he looked in exactly the opposite direction. So he wasn't, when he asked, what are you looking at, and I pointed, well, he was deliberately doing something else. And he did it twice.
And did you ever encounter at any point in your life, both professionally and privately, did you ever encounter any other weird individuals that might have shown up in your life, asked strange questions, or just seemed off?
Once I had somebody call me on the phone that had my voice.
Wait, what?
And that was a pretty weird experience.
Somebody called you and talked to you in your own voice?
Uh-huh.
What did they say?
Well, I had got up one morning with the flu, and I called in sick. And the person I talked to was a secretary. So probably she and maybe my supervisor knew that I wasn't at home. But somebody called, and the person had my voice. And I was terrified, and the person knew where I was. And I can't remember what we talked about, but I was so scared I called my mother afterwards. And I was ready to run home. I was in Columbus, and she lived about 20 miles away. And I didn't, but that was a pretty weird experience.
So did your coworkers know that you weren't there that day when you went back to work?
The only... nobody else... No, I didn't know anybody in the world that had my voice.
Right, but I'm just wondering if as far as they were concerned, if you were there that day. Was this person there impersonating you throughout the entire day?
No, I didn't even think of that. I just assumed, they knew I wasn't there, but I didn't think of anything like that.
I mean, if they can mimic your voice, who knows what else they could do? Somebody could have been posing as you.
That's a creepy thought.
I'm sorry. That's just the first thing that popped into my head.
That didn't pop into my head at all.
Hopefully I'm just weird and that didn't actually happen. But
somebody knew I was home, and that was scary.
Yeah, that is a little weird. It's a little unnerving. Now, see, when we first started doing this show, Moniz warned me. And he said, you're going to pop up on some radars because you're going to talk about things that people kind of don't want you to talk about. And I think for the most part, we've avoided getting on those radars for a long time. But I get a feeling this show is putting us right back on those radars. There was a night when I went home and it felt like somebody was watching me down the street from my house. And from that point on, I kind of was very careful about where we took this show. I'm going to make sure that I'm not seeing anybody after this one.
All right. And I think I know the types of shows you're referring to. You're referring to the certain, we'll call them true crime type of things that involve cults and other.
Not just those.
Yeah. But okay.
That there's certain areas of disinformation where they don't want us sharing certain things.
Yeah.
Not to give stuff away, Moniz, but the same people that have been in your house when you're not home.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
And took my stuff and tried to. Yeah. I had my house broken into. They stole part of my research. I'm an analytical chemist by trade. And I've done a lot of research on what are called trace cases. That's where an object affects physical materials. And I would collect some of the physical materials to do testing on. In a couple of high-profile cases, they came and took the samples and took the results and then tried to burn the house down.
Oh.
2 weeks later, I get confronted by what I'll call a pair of gorillas in Armani suits that weren't black, but threatened me at gunpoint.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And I had mentioned to you, Dr. Scott, when we talked on the phone, that one of the cases Moniz worked on, doing some of that trace research on, was actually Betty Hill's dress.
Correct.
But you still have that, right?
I still have pieces.
Yeah, they didn't take that yet. I mean, we don't know what's going on tonight.
Some of the other stuff they took were certain crop circles that I had, crop circle samples, which was interesting. You know, a lot of people have the, and I'll use this term, misconception that they're all stomped down by people with boards and rope. No, not true. Not all of them are that way, done in that manner. Quite a few are, but not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, Dr. Scott, this led you down this path of researching UFOs as a career, and I mean, I guess the big question is, do you feel like, is your time spent researching UFOs, is it just an effect of your experiences, or do you think that your experiences happen intentionally to put you on this path?
Well, it kind of worries me because I can remember when I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronomer too, and that was way before I heard of UFOs. But we had that funny experience, and I always kind of wondered if something was influencing me. And for example, when my sister and I had that sighting, we both woke up at the same time. We both became terrified at the same time, and it was like kind of maybe there was some mind control or something.
I mean, it certainly seems like you were being pushed in this direction one way or the other. So in all of your research, both working with MUFON and working for the government, I know that you've had the chance to be in some of the secretive areas of places like Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. In all of the research that you've been able to do, it hasn't helped you really get any closer to the answers as to these experiences that you had personally.
No, I'm just as confused as when I studied it as I was when I didn't know anything about it. That helped me a bit.
Well, and I thought we would help you tonight, but it sounds like we're just making things even more confusing.
Well, actually, something I wanted to add about that was I was working for the DIA, and it was above top secret. It was we had to identify all the flying craft over a particular area of the Earth. And I was very disturbed about that whole thing when I went to work. But I didn't say I go around seeing UFOs because, you know, I'd look crazy. But I did just mention UFOs. And it turned out the people that I worked with, my supervisors, had reported a UFO on our classified photography to their bosses and got a really weird response. The bosses said it was a flaw in the film, and it wasn't. So that made me wonder about the upper echelons of the government.
And that seems like a pretty cavalier dismissal of something like that, too.
Well, it obviously wasn't a flaw in film because it was on 2 different missions.
Right, so what are the chances of having the same flaw in 2 different rolls of film? And
impossible.
So it just seems like no matter what, you're going to keep finding these stone walls to getting any closer to the truth. How about in your field work with MUFON? I mean, obviously with that, you have to extrapolate your own answers from what it is that you're gathering. But I would assume that, you know, in all the years that you've done this, you've kind of at least seen some patterns and at least seen some groundwork that you can lay to make a case for the fact that these are actually craft from another planet.
Well, I just couldn't figure out anything about them because they seem to be shape shifting in a lot of the ones I explored, where somebody will see an orb, and it may turn into a humanoid, or they may see a little balls, and suddenly they form together and turn into something that looks like a person, and things like that. And so I'm not too sure whether they from another planet or just some kind of energy that people just don't understand.
So they're seeing these like balls of light that are coming together to form into beings?
Yeah. In one I investigated, they did.
So it's not a matter of it's not somebody being brought up to a ship. It's a being coming down and interacting with somebody here on this planet.
Like that, I think.
That's and so these, I guess these, is that like a, I mean, obviously you're only speculating, but is that like a transportation type thing, or is that those are the energies that are making up these beings, and it could be around us at any given time?
Yeah, I thought that probably we just have very narrow senses of what we see, the radiation that we see, like light is just a small portion of the spectrum, and a lot of it's invisible to us. And the same way for hearing and things, and our energy levels and everything else. And we just may be exposed to such a small spectrum that there's a lot going on around us that we don't know about.
That's kind of weirding me out a little bit too. This is gonna be
I know where she's going.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you've heard similar stories then, if you know.
Yep. Yeah, that's the problem. I don't like commenting on without having the permission from the people.
I don't take that into account. Yeah, sorry.
Well, there was another sighting that was kind of like mine by Walter Webb. He wrote the book about it. I think it was called Encounters at Buff Ledge. And it happened about within a month, and it wasn't too far away. Did you ever hear of that?
I have not.
Sounds familiar.
Well,
yeah.
And it was similar to your sighting that you had outside of Boston?
Somewhat.
It
was an abduction type thing, but it involved little balls of light like I saw that came out of a UFO and things like that.
If I remember right, didn't the Hills report seeing like little balls of light while they were driving?
Well, lights out in a distance, yeah.
But that's not the case that I'm thinking of, where they saw like balls of lights around the vehicle before they saw the actual. I seem to remember there being one abduction case where they saw.
Well, there's a couple of abduction cases. That's the other thing I keep pointing out to people. Most abductions happen while people are doing mundane things. They got the illusion that, well, it's been painted as the most common thing by media more than anything else, of people only get abducted in bed. Most common activity is people driving when they're abducted. So, yeah.
And I seem to remember hearing about another case where there was a car driving down the road and these balls of light just start like kind of populating around the car.
There's plenty of cases like that.
Okay, so it's probably many cases that I've heard.
And yes, when the Hills had their encounters, when they finally came to a stop and the craft landed in front of them, that there were the little balls of light seen. It's not while they were actually driving.
Well, Betty Hill's niece had helped me a lot with this.
Kathy
and
Martin.
I had written a piece that was published several places about comparing a number of the sightings in that area. And one of them was the Hills, and the one of Buff Ledge, and ours, and another one at Sharon, which was a town south of where our experience took place.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some commonalities among these sightings.
Were they all kind of in the same time period? I mean, the Hills were what, 62 or 63?
62.
Yeah, the Bluff Ledge and mine were about the same, just within a month. The Hills was several years earlier. and I think the Sharon was just a couple of years earlier.
Well, I mean, I can't say it enough. I mean, this area just has so much weird stuff that goes on. Excuse me. And it goes back centuries. So I think it was, 1690 was the first reported UFO, or 1670?
Yeah.
There was a UFO reported in the Bridgewater Triangle?
Over the Muddy River. That was actually just north of it.
So that's that feeds into the Charles, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So we're talking like kind of
right up near
north
the tip
of 128.
Yeah. Well, actually more towards Abington.
Okay.
So the tip of the Bridgewater Triangle area.
So, I mean, we've got UFO sightings going back to the colonial era here.
Well, after you told me about that, I looked it up, and it was in John Winthrop's diary that he wrote about that. It was 1639.
Okay.
And what was interesting was I had about most of my ancestors, I think, were in Massachusetts at that time.
Really?
There's no way to tell if any of them saw it. But that was kind of interesting.
In Massachusetts Bay Colony, so they'd be kind of in that area, I would assume.
Yeah, some of them were in the Plymouth Colony, and some of them were in Boston, and all through that area.
And we're talking about something that would have happened kind of right smack dab in the middle between the two.
Yeah. And we were on Route 9 when we began to see our object, and we were not too far from the Muddy River. I looked that place up on the Muddy River, and I'm not too sure exactly where we were, but we weren't too far from it.
I know it.
Where that first sighting was.
I know it feeds into the Charles, I'm pretty sure, but I wonder where else it connects to. The Muddy River.
It looked like it passed Route 9 several times, and we were on Route 9 when we started seeing the object.
Well, the Muddy River separates Boston from Quincy, if I'm not mistaken. Our local commuter rail goes over it. I used to take that into work every day, but it is near where you're talking about, very near.
I'm just trying to see like what else, if it's like some sort of almost like a path. You know what I mean?
Well, it was a navigable waterway that was used at the time. Well, for smaller crafts, but.
Sorry,
all that was pretty interesting.
I don't mean to go down rabbit holes while we're on the air, but that's what ends up happening.
Yeah.
I just go over to Google and I start looking, and I'm like, wait, no, still hosting a radio show. Go down this path later. But well, I mean, just in the time that we have left, we have about 10 minutes left, Dr. Scott. Let's talk about the new book, Sacred Corridors. What can people find in that book that will be unlike things that they've read in other UFO books?
Well, Project Blue Book took place in Battelle Memorial Institute and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And I worked at Battelle, and I've been sent to Wright-Patterson. And so I've seen the places and talked to the people that did the work on Blue Book, and have documents from them and stuff included in my book. And I also have Dr. Hynek was one of the principal investigators, and I have a number of his handwritten letters in the book that tell about what he thinks about UFOs and different things.
Well, and of course, Blue Book is a huge topic right now because the History Channel has that series. Have you had a chance to catch any of that series?
Uh-huh.
What are your thoughts on that, considering that, you're familiar with the actual real Project Blue Book? What do you think of the way they're presenting those stories?
It's not near, well, it's pretty interesting, but it's not exactly as they presented.
Yeah, it seems like
Hollywood.
Yeah, they're trying to turn Dr. Hynek into like a Fox Mulder type figure, and they're bringing in other aspects of paranormal stories that might not have been part of the Blue Book files, and it just seems like it's a plot device more than anything.
Well, Project Blue Book was very interesting in itself, and so I was trying to tell the real story behind the scenes and everything of Project Blue Book.
I mean, what is probably the one thing that's in the book that somebody will read and walk away? Like, what's going to be the thing that sticks in their mind and says, wow, that's something that I find to be the most fascinating part of it?
Well, like the TV show, it shows all this investigation, and it doesn't tell what they did with the investigation. But this was a study at Battelle. It was a secret study. They had a good way to study the results of the investigations. They did a statistical study, and the study showed that there's a probability of less than 1 in a billion that UFOs are real. And that's something people don't realize.
Wow.
We had a lot of fake studies, and I mentioned them in the book too, that they're what people are aware of, and they said, oh, there's nothing to it, don't pay attention to it, UFOs don't exist. And there's lots of reason to think those were fake, but the real studies showed that there's a high probability that they do exist.
Right, it makes mathematical sense that they would.
Well, bear in mind that they also did studies way back in the day that showed, that tobacco was good for you too.
Well, the menthol's medicine.
But the point being, you can make a study say anything. I work in science. I know how that works.
I know. I've heard some polls on TV. The polls on Fox News say one thing. The polls on CNN say another.
And reality and the truth is somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. We did get a good question in the chat room that I want to ask you, Dr. Scott, that actually ties into a lecture that I'm out and about giving. I just gave it in Plymouth the other day, and I'll be giving it in Berkeley at the Council on Aging on February 17th. It's a Sunday afternoon lecture called Presidential Paranormal. And in that, I talk a bit about, the Greys supposedly offering an exchange program of information for abductions with FDR. I talk about Truman and Majestic 12, and I talk about Eisenhower and the secret space program. So the question that came from the chat room is, do you think the government and aliens have been working together in some fashion?
Yeah, everybody asked me that, and it's my opinion from working at the DIA that there's some higher group in the government that knows something about UFOs, but I don't know. They're always talking about disclosure, but with disclosure, I think you'd have to be able to prove what you're disclosing. So that if you said UFOs are real, you'd have to prove that.
Right.
And I don't know if anybody can, because it would involve kind of controlling the UFOs.
So what you're saying is you cannot confirm or deny the existence of EBE-1 or Valiant Thor?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it would depend on the UFOs, I think, to prove it.
Well, and I think that's fair enough because, there, like you said, there has been this push for disclosure, but with that would have to come... That would just open up a whole new can of worms for people to... those who would refuse to believe it would then question things that are being told to them. So it's like, okay, fine. Well, I mean, whatever. I could go down a path here that I don't want to go down, but we have a hard enough time convincing people whether or not climate change is real. So proving the existence of extraterrestrials or transdimensional beings would be an even taller task, I think.
Yeah, it seems to me like there'd be a lot of very complicated things that would have to happen to actually disclose anything, because you'd have to be able to verify what you're saying.
Well, I highly recommend that people pick up the book, Sacred Corridors, Secrets Behind the Real Project Blue Book, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Roswell, Battelle, Memory Metal, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and UFO cover-ups. And they can get that from your website, irenascott.com, and, of course, wherever else you get books, whether you go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or anywhere else online. And, of course, you can pick up our other books as well. Dr. Scott, thank you for joining us and for sharing your experience with us. And we'll hopefully be able to bring you back on in the future, and we can dive in a little bit even deeper into some of this stuff.
I'd be very interested in that, and thank you very much for having me.
And if you're ever in this area, let us know. We'd be happy to meet up and go over some things with you and kind of show you around the area with some of the other stuff that's happened around here.
I would be very interested in that, and I'm hoping to get back there one of these days.
All right. We look forward to meeting you. Thank you so much for joining us, and take care.
Thank you.
That is Dr. Irena Scott. And again, her website is irenascott.com. I knew, Moniz, that bringing her on, we would be able to give her some answers for some of the stuff. I didn't realize we'd open up the door to so many other questions.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that that's what ends up happening, but I think that being able to take her experiences and place it into the context of something that you've been researching and been looking into for years.
It hand in gloves with the rest of the stuff that was happening. So yeah.
And like, this is I'm just going to give you her phone number, because the two of you should just connect and talk, and between the people that she knows and the people that you know, I just think that there's a lot of interesting discussions that can come as a result of that. And just in hearing somebody who, okay, we talk about all these experiences that have happened in the Bridgewater Triangle, happened in southeastern Massachusetts, happened as part of that flap in the late 60s. But now you're saying, okay, but here's somebody that had an experience there, who also, by the way, has above top secret clearance. This is somebody that has something at risk by coming out and talking about these things.
Yeah.
And this is somebody who could, man, I'm going to have a hard time sleeping tonight thinking about some of the stuff that she was talking about.
She had a good amount of stories that were very, very
somebody impersonating her.
That's creepy.
Yeah. And I tried to stay away from the creepy, but you know how it goes.
It finds us.
The ghosts I can deal with. The ghosts I think I have somewhat of a firm handle on. It's all this other stuff that I'm like, I really don't know anything. Every time I think I know something, it's that Rowdy Roddy Piper effect. Just when you think you know the answers, I go and change all the questions. And that's what we do here. And we'll do that again next week. Next week, we'll be talking about Hawaiian legends and lore. I love that. I love being able to just kind of focus in, narrow in on a region or a people, a culture, and kind of learn about their beliefs, their spirituality, their views on paranormal topics, and hear some of the strange mysteries. But the mysteries of Hawaii and of the Hawaiian kingdom you think might be something of the past, but it's still happening today. And in fact, Stephanie and Porter have become part of those mysteries. And so they'll share that story with us next week. If you want to get in touch with us during the course of the week, you can email us spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com. You can also reach out to us on Twitter @SpookySC. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook. Like us on Facebook. Really, anywhere where you can follow the show, please do. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the podcast. Email us. Let us know how you found the show, how you listened. Let us know what topics you want us to cover. What are your favorite shows? We love hearing from everybody. So do that. That's our question, our ask of you. And until next week, for Matt, for Stephanie, I'm Tim. Stay spooktacular.